Hi, I'm Chuck Morendi. I was a real estate attorney for 20 years, but now I'm having a lot more fun. About 15 years ago, I opened my own real estate brokerage, and today I am an exclusive buyer's agent. Where's the safest place to live in the USA? And how does one prep for catastrophic events? Of course, there isn't a universally accepted answer to these questions, but there is a lengthy list of unsafe places to live, and there are specific locations that are much safer than the rest of the country, right? There definitely is a need to be prepared for whatever may come in the future. That's simply common sense and practice. Each of us would be wise, I think, to ask, what can I do that is practical and affordable to prepare for various emergencies that could happen in the coming months and years? In this video, I'll give you my answers to these questions backed up by common sense and the experience of having grown up living off the land in remote Alaska without electricity, plumbing, or modern conveniences, and then living much of my adult life in concrete jungles. For the last 29 years, I've lived in a rural community. I've written elsewhere on my Sequim real estate blog about how I came to conclude 29 years ago that living in the country far from the big cities is much safer for many reasons and provides opportunities to live better and survive in times of emergencies. I wanted a place where I could raise my own children, where crime was low and where the school system was still devoted to education, and the teachers still held traditional educational values, and where we could live a wonderful life. I also wanted to be far outside the chaos and the crime that will certainly ensue in the busy metropolitan areas if a major catastrophic event occurs. I define a catastrophic event as any event that creates extreme hardship immediately as the result of a natural disaster, like an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, a war, whether it's nuclear or conventional, cyber war, or a viral bioweapon, or a major economic crash, or a political crisis that shuts the country down, or a massive power grid failure, which could be an EMP, or the result of a natural disaster or terrorism, or a shortage of the food supply. It doesn't take much imagination to comprehend what will happen in a major city if freeway on-ramps and off-ramps collapse, and there's no escape from the city. All transportation systems are down, communication systems are down, and there's no electricity. Gas stations would be closed, right? So you couldn't even get gas. And there's no way out of the city anyway. Not only are freeway on-ramps possibly damaged, but even if they aren't, the traffic is now bumper to bumper and not moving anywhere. Essentially, one giant parking lot. The banks would be closed and ATM machines wouldn't be working. If the crisis is bad enough, you probably won't be able to use your cell phone to call your spouse at home. And you know what? Even if you could, he or she most likely would not have no way to come and get you. So you can imagine the heyday criminals would have, knowing they could commit any crimes they wanted since no police are going to be able to respond. And criminals are quite aware that a large percentage of Americans are anti-gun and have no capacity to defend themselves. Essentially, people caught in the cities in such a catastrophic event would be totally helpless and at the mercy of violent criminals. If the event is truly catastrophic, like a nuclear war or a massive earthquake or an EMP event that takes out the power grid on military bases, as well as major ports and cities, the military and law enforcement at all levels will be overwhelmed. And you and I will be totally on our own. Help will not be coming in such a case. This is why serious preppers are prepared for any scenario. None of this is conspiratorial or crazy talk. This is simple logic, and a catastrophic event would lead to these results depending upon the severity of the event. Change the consequences slightly for the severity of the event, and you still have a nightmare of epic proportions. Our food distribution system in the U.S. could easily be disrupted, and the grocery store shelves would be empty in a matter of hours if people panicked. Our power grid is at grave risk. You've probably heard about that. And experts have long said it could be easily sabotaged. So is it any wonder that I would choose to live in rural America where the safety factor jumps by an order of magnitude? Now, lest someone think I'm paranoid or an extreme prepper, think again, I'm neither. I lose no sleep whatsoever on the subject of catastrophic events. I have zero anxiety about the future, what Russia and China are going to do, or whether Jamie Dimon is right about a market crash. I live a wonderful life of peace and contentment in a rural area that I call one of the best kept secrets in America. I should admit, I'm also a genuine Christian, so my relationship with God brings me peace in terms of uncertainty. And we're definitely living in times of uncertainty. Nevertheless, is it not wise to do some basic preparation? As my mother taught me when I was a teenager, it's better to be safe than sorry. And surely it's better to be prepared for emergencies rather than be caught unprepared in a horrendous disaster. So what have I done? And what would I recommend in terms of practical and affordable preparation for whatever may come in the future? I've already covered the importance of living in a location that is not at grave risk for chaos and violent crime and starvation. I chose Sequim, Washington, long ago for many reasons, but Sequim is also one of the safest rural areas in America. It's also a place where we won't run out of water, and we can have vegetable gardens, and we can fish and hunt for meat. Many of my neighbors have cows and sheep and goats and live on a mini farm. I live on a mini farm myself. So the city living rarely facilitates or allows gardens or farm animals or for growing and raising your own food. This is why running out of food quickly in cities is inevitable, and why criminals will be stealing food and water as they go from door to door in the cities. Before I share my list of recommendations, I want to make sure you have the single most important one at the top of your list. You can do everything else right, but screw this up, and everything else may not save you and your family. What is at the top of the list? Well, I've already suggested that location is key. You don't have to follow me to Sequim, Washington, but the list of reasons I chose Sequim, Washington should be your list too, wherever you are. I'll briefly describe the attributes and strengths of Sequim that make it the ideal community when it comes to safety, security, and surviving in a catastrophic event. In this context, you'll understand why these attributes are important, and you'll be able to compare and grade your current location on these items. Sequim, Washington is unique in several ways. It's on the Olympic Peninsula, a 2.5-hour drive from the Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area. That's just beyond the urban planners' concentric circles of metropolitan activities, which is to say, people don't drive to a little town like Sequim unless they live here. This is not a destination location, nor is it on a route to a major destination or recreation area. This means random traffic or drive-throughs do not happen and dramatically reduces the crime rate. Driving to Sequim from the Seattle side means driving over the Hood Canal Bridge, which probably would be damaged or closed in the time of a catastrophic event, which would completely cut off traffic from any would-be criminals or gangs in a crisis. The other access is a 2-lane road to Olympia, but an earthquake would bury that road, as has happened many times in rainstorms. Even so, criminals would not have the gasoline or the desire to come to a small rural community like Sequim when there are much bigger prizes in a metropolitan area surrounded by wealthy bedroom communities. In terms of safety from criminals and gangs, Sequim is one of the safest places in America. In terms of climate and weather, Sequim may be the most ideal in the entire United States because we do not have temperature extremes in either direction. And the typical temperature throughout the entire year is within a range of 50 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It rarely snows in Sequim, and when it does, it melts quickly within a day or two. This means you don't need air conditioning in Sequim, and you could also survive without electricity for heaters. If you live in the mountains of Colorado or the deserts of Texas or Nevada or California, you have a serious survival challenge just based on temperature extremes. If there was no food on the shelves in the grocery stores, the vast majority of Americans would be at serious risk of starving, at least in the cities. Few have planned ahead to keep 6 months or more dry food in storage, and few have large quantities of bottled water that would last for months. Of those who have stored food and water, there will most likely be small gangs knocking down front doors to steal what you have so they can feed their own families. In a community like Sequim, we have farm fields all around us, and I live on my own mini farm. Many people have chickens and sell eggs. Our soil is rich, and we get ideal quantities of sun and rain. So many people have their own organic vegetable gardens. We have the Olympic Mountains, which are full of wild animals, especially deer. And we are a peninsula with rivers and lakes and oceans thriving with fish and other sea life. All of this is in addition to the dry food we already have in storage. Can you claim to have all this in your subdivision in Denver or in the Redlands or Houston? Even if you could, thieves will steal it all in a major crisis in the cities, but not in a place like Sequim. Let's talk about water. The single most important life sustenance is water. Let's be honest, if we have a major catastrophic event in our cities, the municipal water systems will be damaged or shut off. Earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes destroy pipes and irrigation systems. If there is no electricity, pumps can't pump water anyway. There is also the recurring problem of municipal water systems in times of natural disasters, and that is the water systems become contaminated, and they'll tell you not to drink it. If you live in a place like Sequim, you have your own private well with plenty of water. We have some of the purest water really in the world, and our water table in our wells has not gone down even after half a century. The Olympic National Forest to the south of Sequim is famous for the most precipitation in the continental United States, with 200 inches of rainfall a year. And all that water comes down in the valley here and out to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. With my own backup generator, I'll have all the water I need in a time of crisis. And since I also have a private septic system, I don't have to worry about a municipal sewer system shutting down either. The last wonderful attribute I'll mention about Sequim that you are unlikely to find in any city or in any bedroom community around major cities is the people. The people who live in a place like Sequim tend to have similar values, and they almost certainly are hardworking, patriotic, and good citizens with traditional family values. Neighbors look out for each other, and most would do anything to help you in a time of crisis. I have some extra things like backup generators in case my neighbors need help. You won't get the same sense of kinship in metropolitan areas. Most people in the cities don't even know each other. And in a time of survival of the fittest, many will steal from each other, and even do so violently. Now let's get to the basic list of items that I recommend wherever you live. In a general order of life sustaining priorities, here's my list. Plenty of bottled water, a Berkey water filter system, and for those of us in rural areas, a private well with a water storage tank. Food stored at home that will last a minimum of 3 months, but even better would be 6 months to a year. Most of this food should be dry storage or canned because if the power grid goes down, your freezer food will thaw and go bad within a week. You cannot use a backup generator to keep a freezer going for weeks or months. A huge advantage will go to those who've been canning food and to those who have a food dehydrator or a freeze dryer. Communications are definitely a priority in any catastrophic event. You'll need to communicate with family immediately, right? I mean, you would want to. And you'll need to be able to find out what is happening in the world. We must realize that it's possible that the internet will be out and even cell phone service may be out. So the question is, what communication tools do you have to communicate with your family and loved ones? Consider a satellite device like the affordable Spot X, which allows emergency text messaging, although not audible. It uses a satellite or balloon system. But there's a question that remains unanswered so far, and that's whether the satellite or balloon systems that they rely on also depend upon ground-based stations to identify subscribers. And we don't know if those ground-based stations will even be operating. So you may not even be able to use the system. Nobody can answer that question. Believe me, I've asked a lot of people. You might also want to consider a mobile ham radio. You can listen to a ham radio without being licensed, but talking to someone on a ham radio requires licensing with the FCC, unless we're in an emergency, in which case you can communicate without an FAA license on your mobile ham radio. You might also want to consider a small Faraday bag for your cell phone and laptop, which will protect them from an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. There are some claims that the latest smartphones are already protected from EMPs, but there's no way to test them without possibly destroying them. Self-defense tools will be a priority in a catastrophic event. Now, I understand our American culture has created an aversion for some people to using self-defense weapons like guns, but if you cannot defend yourself, your spouse, and your children, you will be helpless if they are harmed. The right gun and sufficient ammunition will be critical, and you will have to know how to use it. Do not make the mistake of thinking a stun gun or pepper spray will be enough. Criminals will come in groups of 2 to 4, and they don't run from non-threatening weapons. You can choose not to own a gun, and that's a choice you get to make in America, but that's your decision. You need to acknowledge to yourself that you will have no means of defending yourself or your family from violent criminals. Do not be naive on this topic. I grew up hunting with guns in Alaska. We lived off moose, caribou, Dall sheep, as well as salmon and cod and trout. That's how my dad and I fed the entire family. I later became an expert marksman in the Air Force, and I know how to use a gun for self-defense. So I strongly urge you to learn self-defense with an effective weapon. Transportation is another priority that you don't want to ignore if you're going to be prepared for closed gas stations. Having some gas stored in cans is a good idea, as long as you know how to do that safely. It's a good idea to keep the gas tank full in your vehicle, really all the time. If both your vehicles are near empty at the time of a crisis and the gas stations all close or have no power to pump gas, you'll be kicking yourself. You can also protect your vehicle with an EMP shield. A nuclear event may be unlikely, but all war strategists agree that more likely is a cyber war or an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. In newer vehicles, an EMP will allegedly take out the electronic components so the vehicle won't run. It'll just die where it is. There's a company that makes EMP defense units for the U.S. military and civilian uses, and you can find them at empshield.com. As you'll see from their site, they also offer an EMP shield for your electric panel to protect your home. It's a good idea to have some backup systems in place for your home. You can get an affordable electric and propane backup generators. I have one that will operate on both gas and propane, which I find fascinating. Then having gas stored plus having extra propane tanks full and ready is a great backup system. You can wire your house's electric panel to switch to the backup generator, which I did at my house. That way you can control which appliances in the house will be drawing power. And by the way, a backup generator is not something you would run all day if you are in a power outage situation. You would only run a backup generator for a short period of time, once or twice a day, to pump water from your private well, to heat water up, to cook a meal, to flush the toilets, and maybe to give a freezer a little more time to keep food frozen. Even then, freezers are not something you can keep going on a backup generator for days or weeks. That's why most of your food stored must be dry or canned. A freezer's primary purpose is not to provide food if there's a power grid failure, but to provide some food when there's a food shortage. In a major power outage, that lasts for an unknown period of time. The freezer should be unplugged after a few days. By the way, backup battery generators are also great, but they're not cheap, and many cost as much as gas-powered generators. But they are a good idea if you can afford them. You can also get solar panels for some battery backup systems, which means you could have electricity for the long term if necessary. Who knows whether cell phones will be working, but you need a way to charge your cell phone. Property security is also important, especially because crime will be one of the biggest threats we face. We're not even in a catastrophic event, and people are being murdered, shot, stabbed, carjackings, and home break-ins. They're commonplace in nearly every major city now. Seattle is no longer safe, but neither is Portland, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, New York, and dozens of other cities. I strongly recommend video surveillance cameras around your home. You can buy them incredibly cheap now, and you can monitor them and receive alerts on a smartphone. Let me just save you what took me years of trial and error and thousands of dollars with different systems before I found a system that was reliable and powerful and easy to set up. If you're inclined, go to reolink.com. That's REOLINK.com. You can hardwire your cameras, which is the best way to go, or you can use wireless cameras. The wireless cameras work best for a camera at the end of your driveway or away from the house. By the way, don't forget to secure your property the best you can. I have my entire property fenced, and I have a long, narrow driveway with no other access. And once you've installed your video cameras, post signs that say, "This property under video surveillance." I believe the best first line of defense against criminals who would dare to trespass on your property with the intent to steal your water and food is a good dog. I have a dog that will tell me when anyone is on the property night or day, and he's 110 pounds and would scare anyone thinking about climbing over the fence. I know a lot of people love their cats, but cats are not security dogs. I recommend a good dog that can warn you before someone kicks in the front door. Planning for a financial crisis is beyond the scope of this brief video, but I recommend you do your own research and make timely decisions about where you have your investments in cash and the risk currently in your portfolio. Wall Street retirement funds, no matter how diversified, are at grave risk in a major crash. And banks will close, so you won't be able to get your cash out. Think this through carefully. If you have no resources to buy or sell in a crash, what will you do? If you're wealthy enough, you can buy physical gold as a store of wealth, but that won't buy bread. If you're old enough, you'll know that registered investment advisors always tell you to stay in the market even when it's crashing. They just love to say, "You're in the market for the long run, and markets always come back. Now is not the time to sell." They say that in every major crash, and retirees lose their retirements while they watch and wait. Do not let your registered investment advisor talk you into staying in a market while you watch your multi-million-dollar retirement account lose 70 to 90%. Well, on average, it takes 10 years for the market to come back, so you're at the break-even point. But do you have 10 years? And what if the market doesn't come back? Also, do not forget emergency medical supplies. A large kit would be far better than the little kindergarten kits you can buy at Walmart. And I'll add something obvious here. Hospitals and emergency medical services will not be available in a catastrophic event. You and I will be on our own. I guess you know that. So stock up on meds if you have some that you have to take every day. In a catastrophic event, pharmacies will not be able to fill prescriptions, and most pharmacies have limitations on how much you can order in advance. And you probably can't get more than 2 or 3 months in advance. This is actually one of the reasons I created a lifestyle that does not require I take any meds. There are a lot of problems with taking prescription meds, especially if your life depends on it and you have to take them. And that's way beyond the scope of this video, but you'll find my 537-page paperback book, also in a Kindle version, titled The Master Guide to Optimal Health the Natural Way by Chuck Marundi. And you can find that on Amazon. Lastly, create a network of family and friends with plans on how you will communicate and support each other in a catastrophic event. Know how you'll communicate if your cell phone and internet are down. If you're going to use a SpotX or other satellite device or phone, know in advance how you will communicate, and if you're going to use a mobile ham radio, know what frequency you'll communicate on. While this is the last of my list of prepping, communicating may be the first and most important thing you do. Imagine how desperate you would feel if you can't reach your children and they can't reach you. I've thought long and hard about preparing for a catastrophic event, and I've done years of research. I've never shared these thoughts before, so I hope this list and these thoughts are helpful. I hope and pray we never have a catastrophic event in our lifetimes, but better safe than sorry, right? If you spend a few $1,000s to be prepared at some minimum level, in my opinion, it's well worth it. Maybe it's time to evaluate your location and your preparedness for a catastrophic event. Who knows? Maybe I'll see you in Sequim, Washington. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.